in the history of the track in New Kent. The schedule will also include special events and several higher-graded stakes races. Your next news, 9:30, News on Demand, WRVA.com. I'm Gary Hess, News Radio WRVA, the voice of Virginia.
Sun is up over Central Virginia skies. Hanover moving and the city's alive. One more hour to own this town. WRVA never slowing down. Wake up rich and win the day. Or spend the whole day playing catch up anyway. Richmond's morning news keeps you running strong. 9 a.m. Let's roll all morning long.
All right, good morning. It's 9:04 this morning on Richmond's Morning News. It is Thursday, June 25th. We're joined right now by Governor Jim Gilmore, our former chief executive of this Commonwealth, Attorney General, and, of course, a U.S. ambassador as well. Second half of our conversation, we try to look at what's going on in Capitol Square. Good morning, sir. Thank you for sticking around with us into the 9 o'clock hour. Well, since last we talked, we now have a budget, but it just seems like I just don't understand how the mechanism of this works. So help me out. We waited. Finally, on a Friday, they announce everything. Okay, we've got a budget. They get together. They vote on Monday, send it over to the governor. But now she's saying, no, y'all got to come back on Monday because I'm going to make some amendments. And that puts us within 1 day of having a government shutdown. What do you see going on over there at Capitol Square?
Well, look, I think that what you've seen here is a lot of negotiation, particularly started by Senator Louise Lucas, who didn't want to continue the tax breaks for data centers and in Virginia. Data centers is a hot issue right now. A lot of the localities, people who live in the localities don't want them in their neighborhood kind of thing. But at the end of the day, in my view, it's a great big opportunity for Virginia to continue to grow. But, what to do in the budget? Well, Louise Lucas didn't want to continue the agreement with these groups to get the tax breaks to locate here. And that wrangled things for a long time. It really sort of continues to today. But instead, she compromised and said, well, okay, instead, we'll just do some consumption fees on these people. The public's going to like that, okay. So at the end of the day, that's what has broken that logjam for the budget. But there are a lot of other things that the governor's got to be thinking about as well. I notice also that there's a lot of gun control going on. And, as a former board member of the National Rifle Association, I'm not too keen on that. I prefer to hit hard people who violate gun laws as opposed to trying to disarm the public, particularly since the Second Amendment guarantees the public's right to have firearms. But, that's something that's going on right now as well. And background checks are coming in because of this legislature. The governor has got before her some ideas about the ancestral home of James Monroe, which I happen to think is a real opportunity for the state of Virginia. There's a lot of things that the governor is looking at right now, Rich.
There's an opportunity that the Commonwealth could absorb this. There's a nonprofit that has offered this. They bought the property, and now they're talking about that it could come over and become part of a park or something, and to be able to have a piece of Northern Virginia property like that with such historic significance is a big deal. And then people are pushing back, well, what's the upgrade going to be? How much is it going to cost us to continue to keep this in the manner that it's been? So it's interesting watching that fight that you have over the budget process and whether they'll do that or not. The one thing that we were talking with a member of the House of Delegates earlier this week, sir, was there's an awful lot of language with these retail marijuana shops that we will see pop up. Just help me. Again, I need your expertise on this. Why is that part of the budget not a separate bill that I can have somebody put their name on it, and if it goes great, you get all the credit. If it goes wrong, we know who to hold accountable.
Yeah, I'm not too conversant with the cannabis stuff that's going on. I think that there are moves here to legalize the sale of marijuana and cannabis to the general public. And I guess the idea there is that people are using it anyway, so you may as well get it regulated in terms of quality and all that. I myself am, as a former prosecutor and former attorney general, have no enthusiasm for creating a drug culture in the state of Virginia or anywhere else for that matter.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting that it was part of the budget process and not a separate bill. Which, I look through the budget and I see a bunch of things like that. Like I was told, and I'm looking for, because the thing's so darn big, that we will now take away the mandatory audit of the campaign finances of who gave money and how the campaign spent money on our 3 statewide elected offices, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the attorney general. There's an audit to look at their campaign finances. That's been taken out during this budget process, and will no longer have random checks of members of the House of Delegates. To me, things like that, is that common in Virginia politics? Is that the way these budgets work, that you can have things like that get put in a budget bill, or is that something kind of snuck in there?
No, it's kind of snuck in there. I remember when I was governor, a lot of issues would come up and people say, well, don't worry, that's just going to be, we can handle that in the budget. So you do see that kind of thing that's going along right now. It's a lot of money that's being spent right now, and the governor, I think, has to look at all of this and make decisions. But just, bear in mind that, the Democrats at this point, and very radical Democrats in many cases, are in charge of the state Senate, the House of Delegates, and the governorship. So the policies of the state of Virginia at this point are being operated by liberal majorities everywhere in the state of Virginia. So you got to keep your eye on it. That doesn't stop the public from reviewing these things. You can't just ignore what's going on down there in Capitol Square.
It's very interesting watching it down there. And again, I see the Democrats having this fight amongst themselves. I've said this, and I'll repeat saying, and I think I might have even mentioned this to you last week. I just want to see the Republicans actually making some statements, standing up. I know they can't. There's nothing they could do because there's a super majority in the House, and they don't have standing to really achieve anything in the Senate. But I still want to see more leadership than what I think I'm getting right now.
Well, of course, I'm focused on the Congress, and I think we need more leadership there too, from especially from the Republicans. That at the national level, the Republicans control pretty much everything.
Right.
And I'm frankly not seeing the kind of leadership that I think that the Republicans ought to be doing. Now, that doesn't mean you turn around and support the Democrats. I've made it clear in these things, and I try to be nonpartisan when I'm talking about war ambassadorship in the Middle East and Ukraine. But when we talk about Virginia, everybody on the call knows I'm a lifelong Republican and a former Virginia Republican governor. So I watch things on that basis. I guess you know that,
right? And it's so interesting. You saw what happened in New York. Speaking of that, the Democrats are going so far to the left over here. And to me, sir, I hear Republicans going, oh, good. Hey, bring it on. I want to take those people on. To me, that scares me that there's so many people and they're gaining more power and more following every year. It seems like every time we have something in some of these progressive cities, they keep going further and further to the left. And I see Republicans saying, hey, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Let me run against that guy. To me, it scares me because I think you're just playing mess around and find out.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. There's so many members of the House of Representatives at the congressional level that, the electing a few nutcases in New York City isn't going to change the trajectory of the United States of America. I think, though, that what's very interesting that's going on right now is the back and forth between President Trump and the Congress and the tone of everything that's going on. So substantively, the Congress passed overwhelmingly a housing law that would make housing more available nationwide, overwhelmingly. The president has said he's not going to sign the bill unless the Congress turns around and supports his voter integrity law that he's insisting on, called the SAFE Act. Well, the Republicans in the Senate are reminding us that a bill like that would have to get by a supermajority to break the filibuster in the Senate. It's not possible. So the president is holding up a housing bill in order to get a piece of legislation that's impossible to get because the Democrats will never endorse it, and there aren't enough Republicans out there to break the veto. So that's going on right now. And then, of course, all that manifested itself in a blow-up meeting yesterday,
right?
In the Senate. And it's very interesting. There are a lot of interesting things going on. The president has done a 180 flip on the Ukraine war, and now he's saying that Zelensky is holding his own, is doing a great job, which I think startled Putin. I'm on board for all that. I think, as you know, I support the Ukrainians, and I don't support the fascist aggression by Vladimir Putin. And so Yeah, but the president turns on a dime. But today he's saying things which, in my opinion, I would say and I approve of.
Well, again, we always talk about this, that he is transactional. So he will horse trade probably with the best of them over there. We got a minute here. The filibuster. A lot of people talk about the filibuster. And I look at it and they say, well, the Democrats are going to break it anyways. We might as well do it. To me, I watched Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin stand there in the face of their party. They're both out now because they stood up to not break the filibuster. So I know the intention's there, but I just think the filibuster is so important that I'm torn between doing what you need to get done before they do it, but having some kind of standing, having some kind of high moral ground that you look to when you respect the rules of the Senate.
Yes. Look, the rule of the Senate has been in place for a long time, and it basically says that unless you have I think it's a 2/3 vote, then you can't stop debate, which means you can never bring the bill to a vote. So the filibuster basically is a block. Frankly, it's one remaining thing that drives you a little more towards bipartisan consensus, and you knock it out. And what happens? If the Democrats take charge of the Senate and the House in the next election, and there's no filibuster check on them, God knows what they'll do. So it's a back and forth on this right now. But I noticed yesterday this blow up went on with the president in tone right now is interesting to me. He kind of got into a shouting contest with Benjamin Netanyahu, which I don't blame him much, but the tone is strong. There was a very strong tone against the lady who runs Meet the Press,
Right,
which was a little puzzling. And then, of course, this blow up yesterday in the Senate. By the way, the blow up in the Senate was against Senator Cassidy of Louisiana, who's going to be going out of the Senate. He's a very good senator, by the way, but he's going to be knocked out of the Senate. But there was an argument between the two yesterday that that's been described as a shouting match. But it also shows that maybe some senators on the Republican side are starting to do their job. So me, I tend to think that the Congress ought to be more active as a check and balance within the system. And, I'm troubled by the fact that I think they've been very passive. But you can't turn it over to the Democrats. They're going to just do terrible policy, as we just saw in New York City.
That's why I keep telling everybody, do not CA my VA. And they keep going further and further to the left. And, well, we'll see what happens. Governor, I always appreciate the opportunity for us to sit down, have a conversation. You truly are a blessing in my life that we get a chance to catch up every week. I will talk to you next week, right before the 4th of July. I can't wait.
Look forward to it. Thanks again, Rich.
All right. Thank you so much. Governor Jim Gilmore joining us here on News Radio WRVA. Program today brought to you in part by Michael Greer, GreerFinancialGroup.com. I told that story about going to lunch with Michael Greer yesterday. He is really an interesting cat when you sat down.